Welcome back. I'm Rena from Quilt Israel, and we're here to sew the next block in our quilt along. And here it is. This is what's called the interlocking block. It also has another name. I think it's called the 4-patch strip block. And I'm sure it has other names as well. If you know what they are, please write them down in the comments below. So what we're going to be learning today is how to create strip sets, as well as making a 4-patch block. I hope you enjoy. Let's get started. Here we are back at our cutting mat, ready to cut fabric. What we need to make this block is 4 sets of strips 6.5 inches long by 2 inches wide. Instead of cutting them as 4 separate strips, what we're going to do today is we're going to do something called strip piecing, where we piece the strips and then do the cutting. If you're working with yardage, off the bolt, you get a nice long 44-inch long strip. You don't have to make any other cuts. You just cut off the 2 inches. But since I'm working with fat quarters are a bit different, shaped a bit different. Fat quarters are 18 by 22. So in order to save a little bit of time, if you multiply 6.5 by 4, you get 26 inches, which doesn't really work for a fat quarter. So we're going to do it in 2 sets of strips for the fat quarter. That means that we'll need 2 inches by 13 inches. Okay, so let's get started cutting. Just like last time, you can see here that if I measure this is a little bit over 18. This is over 19, but it's just not going to cut it. So what we're going to need is we're going to need to cut it down, and then from there we can make two strip sets and then cut those strip sets. Just like last time, if you need to learn how to cut fabric, you can see that in my last video. I'll leave a link in the description box. Click in the corner to get to my video on how to cut fabric. This is going to be our second set of strips. Okay. From here, what we're going to do is sew our strips together. And then after we're done sewing our strips, we're going to cut them. Okay, let's go to the sewing machine. So here we are at the sewing machine ready to sew. I have 2 sets of each of the fabrics that I want to sew together. This is a long strip. I can either keep it as one, but I think it'll just be easier if I separate it into 2, so it's the same length as the other strips. And from there, I'm going to sew them in pairs. As I sew, I keep my eye where the presser foot sits. I don't keep my eye on where the needle is hitting the fabric. As long as I can trust my 1/4 inch, I'm good to go. So here I am at the sewing machine, ready to sew my strips together. I have them lined up at the top, and if I'm not feeling confident, I can pin them down the side. This time I'm not gonna bother with pinning. What I'm going to do is I am going just to line the pieces up, make sure if they're not aligned perfectly, I'll give a little scratch to just lightly move it over. And what I'm going to do is I am going to sew from top to bottom, letting the feed dogs pull the fabric through. I slowly start at the top and just let it continue through the machine. Here I see that it's getting a little bit off. I'll scoot it over and I'll just continue. Even though my hand's here on the fabric, my hand is not doing any work. It's just making sure to keep the fabric straight. First strip completed. I'm going to cut it, I'm going to finger press it open, and then I'm going to start on the next one. Finger pressing here is I still want it to go to the back, so I take the darker fabric. The darker fabric always is on the top, and I'm just going to push it over. Right now the direction that your seams are doesn't matter, but you'll see when we come to put the whole block together, it will matter a little bit. Okay, put it on the side. Go to the next strip. You can see here this is the selvage, so I can either choose to turn it over to the side that's not the selvage, or if I am at the selvage, I can just start underneath. Now it's time to press. Now I go back and I sew these sets of pairs. It doesn't matter that these are pairs. I'm going to start at the top and I'm going to continue all the way down the strip. What we just made here is called a strip set. So now I'm going to give it another press where the new seam is, same way that I did before, and then we'll be able to go and start cutting. Same way as before, to make sure all the seams go the way I want. Lift it up. And let the iron push the seam in the direction I want it to go. Okay. 2 ironed strip sets. So here we are back at the cutting table and we're ready to cut our strips. What we need is 4 6.5 long strips. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the beginning, and here I'm lining up my lines so that I can make sure that I'm cutting straight. Over here is my rotary cutter. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to clean off the edge to make sure everything's the same length. And from here, I happen to have a 6.5 inch ruler. Makes it easy. Like once again, I'm lining up also in the middle all the different pieces. Make sure that this is at the edge over here, and I make my cut. That's 1 square. And once again, I line it all up all the way to make sure that this edge is set correctly. Put pressure down. And here I have my first 2 blocks. And now I will cut my next 2 blocks. Same exact way. It's important to press well so that you get nice straight seams. I'm going to start. If it's easier for you, you can start by measuring, lining things up on this side of the ruler. And then you can cut much less off at the edge. 45-degree slice. Gotten with you. Rotate your piece of fabric. Line it up. First cut. And same thing where things are lined up. Beautiful. Second cut. So now it's time to put our block together. Now you can decide however you like. You can decide, basically there are 4 blocks that are exactly the same, and you can decide what placement you like. So I like the placement where the cream is with the lightest colors in the middle, and then I rotate it 90 degrees, and I put my next one. Now if it's easier for you, you can just stack them and then just rotate, and then rotate the next one, and then rotate the next one. And this, after it's sewn together, that's our block. If you like, you can do it exactly the opposite with the light at the end. This is all a matter of taste. Similar but different. Doing it this way, it really focuses on these 3 bars, and this becomes a background. When you rotate it the opposite way, the focus becomes the one cream strip in the center, and the colors cascade out. Now we're ready, we can take it back to the sewing machine. So here we are sitting at the sewing machine. This block is known as a 4-patch block. The reason why is because it has 4 different quadrants, and we're going to be sewing those 4 quadrants together. What I'm going to do is I'm going to sew this piece onto this piece, then this piece onto this piece, and then I will sew these 2 pieces together. Before I get started, I like to organize the blocks first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just lie them the way that I want to sew them. I'm going to start by sewing the top block, chain piece, and sew this bottom block. Let's get started and make sure to line up my block corner to corner, and just like before, I let the feed dogs pull the fabric through. I'm tucking the seam so that they go the way that they were before. First done. Line up the second. Make sure that these 2 line up at the bottom. I'm just going to put my finger on here to make sure that it ends up in the same place. So now it's time to put these 2 halves together. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to iron each one to the white side. In general, I would iron to the dark side and not the light side, but in this case, because we have 4 different seams that we're ironing against, I want to iron towards the path of least resistance. That way, when we're done with the block, everything will lie nice and flat, and it'll just be much easier to work with. Okay, so here I am, like before. Since I want it to go this way, I'm going to lift this side up and give it a quick iron. Same thing on this side. I'm lifting this side up, and I'm ironing over to the white. I didn't separate. Even when I chain sewed these two pieces together, I didn't separate them. And the reason that I didn't separate them is that it's just a good way if you're sewing a lot of different blocks. Here it's less important, but if you're sewing a lot of blocks together, it'll just keep all your blocks straight, and it requires a lot less thinking. And I'm a very big advocate of thinking as little as you can and making things easy. So that's why I didn't separate these. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna fold them over. And because I pressed this seam towards the left, yeah, that's left, towards the left, and this seam towards the right, what I can do now is I can do something called nesting. And so what nesting does is you're basically going to get each of your seams so that they're like kissing each other. It's something that's hard to show, and once you do it and you feel it, you know what it is. So what you're doing is you're pushing them against each other so that they click in place. And then in this case, I am gonna put a pin because this is such a large block. We're talking about, on this edge, we're talking about 12.5 inches. If I was doing, let's say, a smaller block, let's say where I had blocks that were 3 inches or 4 inches between each part, then I probably wouldn't pin. But in this case, because it's so long and I want to make sure my seams nest together, I'm going to just put one little pin in there. Nesting seams in general just give it a more perfect look. In this case specifically, in this block, because it's all coming to the same section in the same color, not as important, but it's a good practice to get in whenever you can do it, is to try to nest them together. Okay, so now I'm going to take it back to the sewing machine, and I'm going to sew the last seam. Here we are at the sewing machine. I'm going to nicely match the corners the same way we've done before. And I'm going to put it down. Here you see it's not perfect, so I'm just going to give it a little tug over. And right now the presser foot is holding it down and acting almost like a pin itself. So that's a good start. And then once again, the only thing I'm trying to do is I'm trying to tuck the seams so that they go under the presser foot. And over here, now I'm getting to my pin. I'm just going to pull it out, leave it on the side, match the other ends together, hold them lightly, hold them together, but I'm not gonna pull. I'm just gonna hold them gently, and then I'm just gonna let the sewing machine finish its job. And just by putting one finger here and just guiding it through, there, I can finish up my block. Now for the last press, and we're all done. Once again, just hold it up and press it out. And we are done with our second block. Block 2 completed. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Strip piecing is such a wonderful method that can save so much time. We saved a bunch of time on this block, Just imagine that multiplied as much as it would take to make a whole quilt. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. And if you could give this video a thumbs up, that would be great. Thank you so much.